Welcome to the Authentically Successful Show. I'm Carol Schultz, founder and CEO of Vertical Elevation, a talent equity and leadership coaching and advisory firm. Listen at the end of the show for information about becoming my next guest on one of the most important podcasts for building thriving companies. Here we go. My guest today is Camille, CMO of Bushel, an ERP integrated platform and app that supports ag businesses to connect more efficiently. Their focus is on strengthening the relationship between agribusiness and farmer. Camille, welcome.
Thanks, Carol. Glad to be here today.
Well, I'm glad to have you. I have not had the opportunity to interview too many female CXOs, so I'm always delighted when I have one. So you joined a company by the name of Myriad Mobile in early 2014 as their VP of Marketing and Customer Success. They were a mobile web development company, and they were founded in 2011. Then in May of 2017, the company went through a pivot and became Bushel, and then you became their CMO, their Chief Marketing Officer, just about a year ago. Tell me that story.
Yeah. So when I came into the company in early 2014, we were Myriad Mobile. And what we were doing at that time is we were focused on custom software development. So gun for hire for any company that was looking to build out specifically mobile. So that was really our unique value proposition at that time. And remember in 2011 when the company was formed, that was the time tablets, iPads, things like that were just really starting to be used more or come to market. And so a lot of businesses were really starting to, explore and figure out how are we using mobile devices for our business operations. And so that's really where we started. Along the way, we had always considered or talked about what would it be like if we were a product company, because as you might guess, the revenues from a services company, it's always your next project, right?
Right.
And so from a business model perspective, we had always, kept our eyes open, kind of looking around and seeing what would be a way that we could enter the product realm with our own product and bring it to market. And that's really what we did in mid-2017 with Bushel. So before Bushel was the company, Bushel was just the product. And we went to market with that in 2017. And how that happened was it just was a really organic journey to focus within agriculture. We're headquartered in Fargo, North Dakota, which is one of the most productive areas in the world in terms of agriculture.
Right.
And so we had a lot of companies coming to us from the custom software and services side, working with them to develop some of these applications. And then along the way, we started to see some opportunities, particularly in the grain industry, and the grain industry really needing some type of product or tool to help the communication between the grain elevator, cooperative, ag retailer, and the farmer, so that a farmer could, more easily see their account information. And so we first went to market with the Bushel mobile app, our kind of flagship product, in mid-2017. And then from there, it was kind of off to the races.
Awesome. So as we said, the company was founded in 2017. You took your A round in May of 18, B round in December of 2019, and you closed your C round in April of this year for a total of about $75 million in institutional investment. What is it about Bushel that has your investors excited? And would you say the majority of your investors are, large grain companies and agri companies?
Yeah, the majority of our investors are involved within the agriculture industry. So they're focused on, connecting the dots that a lot of the dots that currently are kind of siloed within the agriculture industry today. And so, I think what was most interesting for our investors about Bushel is that we were focused and continue to be focused on building the digital infrastructure, is what we call it, for the grain industry. And how we talk about digital infrastructure is we compare it to the physical infrastructure that was built in the United States, hundreds of years ago. And that physical infrastructure made the United States the most competitive country in the world as it relates to, being able to sell commodities overseas. that infrastructure was a competitive advantage. And at Bushel, we believe that building the digital infrastructure is going to add another advantage to that. So being able to take some of these disparate systems and connect them and standardize them was a really interesting strategy for our investors. And there was really no one else doing it within the grain supply chain.
That was my next question. Yeah.
Yeah. Our particular approach, and how we really did that initially was, again, we had found a solution for a pain point. We've been tracking ag tech for the last 10 years. Our one of our founders, Ryan, he had come to market with a farm management system 10 years ago and, brought it to market, got a little traction, and he eventually ended up selling it off. And so our co-founders had some experience in the product realm, as we were getting the services company up and going. But as we were first going to market with it, we found this product that we could bring to market that was actually solving a problem. And that problem was that it was really difficult for the farmer to be able to see their account information with their local grain facility, cooperative, ag retailer, processor. And so, I know we'll talk about this later too, but our business model with Bushel has really been B2B to B. So, and I didn't put C at the end because a lot of times companies will talk about this B2B to C with, business to business to farmer.
Consumer. Yeah.
And they put the farmer as consumer, but that is another business. These are multi-million-dollar operations. They are not the consumer. They are another business.
Right.
And so we were able to build value through some of our digital tools for that B2B to B chain.
So when you say it allows the farmer to see their account, what is it in their account that they're able to now have visibility into?
Yeah. So the first kind of value prop that really resonated was the farmer being able to see their scale tickets in real time. So anytime a farmer is bringing a commodity, their grain into their local elevator, whether they're fulfilling a contract or they're bringing it in and they're spot contracting, they get a scale ticket that confirms, how much was delivered, the different grading metrics that might be on there. And then they'd usually have to tally those scale tickets afterwards to kind of get a tally of how much they've delivered and how much might be left on a contract. So the scale ticket was the first thing. The second thing was just their grain contracts that they had with the local grain facility. How much do they have left to deliver? Had they been paid out on it yet? All of those things, they had to call the grain elevator in order to check on those things before.
Right.
Or they were taking, in the case of the scale ticket, they were taking something that had kind of already been digitized, right? Because the scale interface had some type of way of garnering that information from the truck delivery. And then it was spitting it out on a piece of paper. And then the farmer would have to re-digitize it. So we really focused on how do you eliminate that paper and make it easier for that account information to be surfaced and seen by the parties that need to see it, both the grain elevator and the farmer.
So looking at the biggest problem that you're solving for your clients, is the client the farmer? Is it the company they're selling to? Is it both?
Yeah. So our primary customer is that agribusiness, that grain elevator, cooperative, ag retailer. They are the ones who are purchasing Bushel software. So it's a software as a service business model. They're the ones who are subscribing to the software. And in the case of our mobile product, the grain elevator then is able to put a branded app in the app store that the farmer can then download for free.
And of course, they all have a cell phone.
Right.
Smartphone, right.
Yeah, the majority of them do. And so we just saw it as a way to to scale, bringing this software to market and to ultimately, again, reach that farmer and provide that value to them. But what were the kind of pinch points in that grain supply chain where we could work with a smaller subset of customers to reach a larger subset of users? And it was really around that grain elevator, ag retailer segment that we were able to focus on. And again, first, it's got to add value to them, right?
Yes.
In order for them to be able to deploy it to their farmers. And so, again, from day one, our kind of ethos has been that we're strengthening the relationship between that grain facility and that farmer, and that's held true today. We didn't feel like this was necessarily a space that needed all of this disruption. The ag supply chain is actually pretty efficient. And I would even argue that from the farmer side that they're actually pretty efficient too. And so what were the ways that just were not uncovered at this point, and that, it's still a very paper heavy business and industry. So what were some ways that we could help, move away from that a little bit and add value through some of these digital tool sets?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Bushel has acquired 2 companies this year. Tell me a little bit about the companies that you've acquired and why.
Yeah. So in June of 2021, we acquired a company called FarmLogs. So FarmLogs has a very similar kind of origin story from Bushel or to Bushel as well. Co-founders Jesse Vollmer and Brad Koch, they both started they were first doing a consulting business. So they were doing kind of IT consulting. And then Jesse is one of those farm kids that I talked about earlier. And he really saw the need for some of the on-farm activities to be digitized. So in 2011, FarmLogs forms, and they're a farm management system that is selling direct to the farmer. So that's their business model, is that it's a SaaS subscription the farmer is paying for.
Okay.
So we acquired them this year because one of the things that we're really seeing is, phase 1 of Bushel was really, again, provide these tools to grain elevator and farmer to help strengthen that relationship. Phase 2 is how can that farmer then start putting in the needed information to get a holistic view of their operation. And how we're viewing FarmLogs is we're kind of calling it the operating system for the farm. And so there could be multiple data inputs coming in into FarmLogs to help feed in that information to show the P&L on the farm, or some of the inputs that are being applied within the farming operation. And so Bushel being able to properly permission, if the farmer wants their grain elevator information to go into their FarmLogs platform, they can do that. If they want their machine data integrations to go into their FarmLogs account, they can do that. So getting a centralized spot that farmers can properly permission in the right data points to paint a more holistic picture of their operation. We just really felt that if we had a platform like FarmLogs that was a part of Bushel, we could help accelerate that vision. There have been a lot of partnerships within agriculture over the last 10 years in ag tech. And some of them are really successful, but partnerships are hard. They're a lot of work. It takes dedication and effort from both sides. Right. And it has to remain a priority for both sides. And we were just able to see there was a window of opportunity that presented itself where, FarmLogs was interested in joining the vision that Bushel had of connecting this digital infrastructure. And so it was just good timing to help kind of continue to manifest this vision for us.
Have you kept any of... I'm sorry, go on.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I was just going to say that was the first one, but you're probably going to ask about the team.
Right. So the team at FarmLogs, have you kept... How many were there in the company, and how many have you kept on?
Yeah, we kept all of them. There were just a handful of team members at that time. And we did keep all of them on, which we were really excited about. And they've all been just fantastic teammates. And they're... the thing that I've just been so impressed about is their passion for the farmer. And we certainly, of course, have that too at Bushel, right? Like I said, a lot of us are farm kids, our families are farming. But our primary buyer our primary customer is that grain elevator.
Right.
The farmer gets benefit. And so getting this, kind of counterbalance or additive passion for the farmer was something that's just been really, really enjoyable.
That's great. What are the founders of FarmLog doing for Bushel now? What roles are they in?
Yeah. So Jesse, he is our VP of Farm Strategy. So he's really taking that product portfolio of farm logs and leading that. And then Brad from the engineering side is leading the engineering efforts on the farm logs platform.
Very good. And so tell me a little bit about the other company that you acquired.
Yeah, so this was the most recent one, GrainBridge. We closed this acquisition in October of 2021. And what I'll also mention about that is we were doing our planning and strategy for 2021. Neither of these acquisitions were necessarily on the table at that time.
Interesting.
It was opportunities presented themselves. We always are keeping our finger on the pulse of the ag tech industry and what's going on. But it wasn't necessarily like we knew it was going to happen in 2021, maybe later, right? Maybe this was something that was going to happen later. But the timing just seemed right. And we were able to put together a structure that worked for all parties involved, mutually beneficial for all involved. So we acquired GrainBridge, and GrainBridge was originally started in about 2008. It was privately funded, privately held for quite some time. And then in 2018, ADM and Cargill came together and formed a joint venture for GrainBridge. And so, there was a lot of effort and focus on that, to build out that joint venture. And GrainBridge originally was really focused. They have a tool still called GrainBridge Advisor. And it was a way for, grain brokers to advise their customers on, different selling strategies within the grain markets. So it was an advisement tool. And then when the joint venture came together with GrainBridge, ADM, and Cargill, it was a very similar approach to what Bushel was taking with our grain customers. So being able to have that mobile and web experience for the farmer to go in and see their account information and learn more about how they're performing. Where GrainBridge was really focused was on more of we call it data refinery. And so they were really starting to get into more of the data science of grain marketing and how different data points and just, farmers being aware of some of the different data elements and, building more educational resources around grain marketing, how that could help improve margins for the farmer. And so they were further ahead on some of those data science capabilities. And, again, it was a very similar type of strategy in the market. It's just that GrainBridge was really focused on ADM and Cargill. Those were their two main, essentially customers. Whereas Bushel has about 210 unique customers.
Got it. Okay.
Going at 2,000 plus different grain receiving locations across the U.S. And so, had good talks with, of course, the GrainBridge team and then ADM and Cargill, and came to a conclusion that, hey, this might be one of those opportunities where, all boats rise with the
tide rises with the boat. Yeah, right.
Yeah, the tide. Yeah. So
however that goes.
And so again, it was just good timing, and it's another thing that really showed me, agriculture is big. It's a really big industry, but it's also really, really small. And the relationships that we've been able to form over the last several years have been really critical. And a lot of that came from, I think Bushel having this very collaborative approach within the industry. I talked about this earlier a little bit, not disruptive for disruptive sake, but I think what we saw was actually what could happen if we were a bit more collaborative here. And I think that's ultimately what, ADM and Cargill saw, of course, but I think that's also what our investors saw, is that we were leaning into this kind of, let's call it Midwest sensible collaboration. And, maybe there's some naivete in there too. But it was something that, we were winning the market with.
Right.
And so, the proof is in the results, right? And we were able to show that we were able to continue growth by having more of that collaborative ethos.
How many employees were with Grainbridge, and did you keep all of them as well?
They were around 18 employees, and we did keep most of them on as well. With any acquisition, there's always, the opportunity for team members to pursue other opportunities, or maybe they've been through an acquisition before and that's not necessarily what they're signing up for. But we were able to keep most of the team, which was really, really great for us.
One of the biggest challenges, Camille, for companies when they acquire is meshing the cultures. Did you find, were there any challenges between, differences between your culture and the other two companies, or even between themselves, right? And you?
Yeah. I would say, no critical differences. Farm Logs, I think, was just, very cut from the same cloth, independently owned like Bushel, very similar origin story, like I talked about earlier.
Sure.
Founded in, ag country area in Michigan. And so I think there were just some, cultural values there that very much aligned. And then Grainbridge too, a little bit of a different structure, right? Because it had been private and then it went into this joint venture with a publicly traded company and a private company. So it was a little bit different, but still really sensing that, tie to agriculture and, deep dedication by the team to solving some of these, fundamental issues within agriculture, lack of digitization, lack of standardization, lack of, the owners or the creators of data points to be able to properly permission it out to places where they want to permission it out to. And I keep comparing it to, it just felt like overall, I always make this comparison of, does their moral compass point the same due north as yours? And I really felt that in both of those acquisitions with the team members there. There was very much that same true north moral compass pointing in both of them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I want to step back a little bit and talk to you about your journey, really to Myriad Mobile and into marketing and customer success, because prior to that, you really spent your career in nonprofits, not doing that kind of work.
Yeah.
So so tell us a little bit about that background and what you did and how, how do you make a pivot into marketing without having that experience?
Yeah. So I did spend the early part of my career doing fundraising and development for a couple of nonprofits, public broadcasting station, regional accredited art museum, and then a regional chamber of commerce. And, in the fundraising and development realm of the nonprofit world, that really is your marketing arm. Those are the strategies that you are activating and deploying to increase your revenue, to make the sale essentially. And so while, I wasn't making that connection initially in my career, it became pretty obvious that a lot of the tactics, the strategies that I was doing, they were really just all marketing related. And then the communications side of that also came in very naturally, particularly in running some of the leadership programs and events at the Chamber of Commerce. So I felt like, even though it wasn't like a one-to-one direct comparison, I definitely had the fundamentals that I had, learned early on. And then, no, go ahead.
Please. No, please finish. And then
I was going to go, I was going to talk about the customer experience side then as well. And that was something that, we started to form as we continued to go to market with our Bushel products. So we needed those customer success managers to help onboard, the products and tools for our customers. And so that was really the new thing that I hadn't done before. I hadn't built out a customer experience team. So that took just a lot of, reaching out to network and getting connected with folks who had, kind of been there, done that. And, thankfully had a lot of good people who were gracious enough to give me some tips and pointers along the way to help build that out.
What would you say the biggest challenges were for you leaving the nonprofit world for Myriad Mobile?
So I went from, these nonprofits who you are just constantly bootstrapping everything, right? So
you're always treading water.
Always treading water. And then you go to a startup who is always bootstrapping everything and always treading water. But the difference was, it was more so going into a technology company.
Yeah.
And just the way that they used tools to be efficient in how we were doing our work. I remember I had this is like a small example, but I had been using G Suite or Google Workspace that they call today. I had been using their collaboration tools with some of the work that I had done at the Chamber of Commerce and the nonprofits, because I had to collaborate with a lot of different volunteers, and I needed a more efficient way to collaborate on some of these spreadsheets or documents. And so I just started using those on my own. But it was just a very clunky, like internally at some of those nonprofits, it was just a very clunky, not using the most modern software. And then going into Myriad at the time, now Bushel, it was like night and day. I mean, to the point of they didn't want paper. They didn't want paper anywhere. Like all notes are going to be on your laptop, and it was a little hard at first to make that transition. And so I think it was more so like the tooling of it all, and some of those efficiency tools for just getting your job done, which has been really great. Right. And, we've continued to accelerate that, with our teams as well.
How do you typically find your customers, your prospects? Or how do they find you?
Yeah. So, we have a very defined market. We're focused within the grain industry for that flagship offering that we have. And so, we kind of know who our target market is. It's grain elevators, ag retailers, cooperatives, processors, soy crushing plants. We know who the target market is. And so we can really track to that. But then, as I mentioned earlier, about the importance of relationships, getting involved in the industry beyond just showing up at a trade show or an event, but getting involved in some of the industry associations and, hearing firsthand about some of the pain points that these customers might have has also been something that's been really valuable. So, we do your, fundamental marketing activities around content marketing, demand gen marketing, different, webinars or events that we've done. But then where we have really found it to be really helpful is when we were doing more in-person type things, showing up and meeting some of these prospects and customers in person. So some of the bigger trade shows and associations where we had the opportunity to talk with them was really helpful in those early couple of years.
Are you back to in-person events like that? Not since you mentioned it.
Yeah, for the most part, the grain industry certainly seems to have opened up all in-person events. Probably midsummer is when I saw that tide shift a bit.
Yeah. So Bushel has about 240 employees now. What would you say are the biggest challenges that you're facing within the company, just general challenges as well as employment challenges? We hear a lot about that on the news these days.
Yeah. When you said challenges, my first thought, of course, went to, employment challenges. I think every business is feeling that right now. One of the, silver linings, right? Because if we had to do it all over again, we certainly wouldn't have picked to go through a global pandemic, but here we are. So let's look at some of the silver linings.
Yes.
It showed us, most of our team was located in Fargo, North Dakota prior to the pandemic. And, that was a goal. We really wanted to build the company in Fargo. We believe that Fargo is an ag tech hotbed in the United States. Well, then COVID hits, and all of a sudden we all realized that we can still be productive remotely.
Yeah, very good.
So that was a bit of a game changer for us in opening up some of the, other areas around the United States to bring in team members. And today, I think I just heard the stat, we're around between 23%, I think, of our team is not headquartered in Fargo.
That's fantastic.
I think other challenges that we face is, we continue to talk about, the need for this digital infrastructure within the grain industry, which can at times feel like a bit of a, nebulous thing. And so continuing to hone that in and have, our key audiences understand what that is important. But I think it goes around, we are really trying to bring this idea of, the proper permissioning of data points to the appropriate people in the ag supply chain. How do we make this easier for people so that, 95% of farmers who are getting paid today for their grain are getting paid in a paper check? How does that become, a more digitized thing? And so bringing people along to some of the realities that exist today, like I think some people won't necessarily believe you that some of these things are still very paper-based and antiquated.
No, I given what I do, it wouldn't surprise me a bit that it's still that way. It's that way. It's that way in the insurance industry. So much, a lot of it's getting better, but yeah.
Yep. And so bringing people along that journey and that mutual understanding of A, do we admit that it's an issue, and B, do we acknowledge that we can do something about it, again, by leaning into that more collaborative nature and spirit.
Right. Yeah. Well, so let me ask you this. Do you get a paper check every 2 weeks, or do you have direct deposit?
That is direct deposit.
There you go. So they're really practicing what they're preaching, at least, right?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
If I were to ask either Jake or Ryan, and hopefully you can speak for them, if we're talking to either of them and ask them what they feel the biggest mistakes they've made as leaders have been in, since the pivot to Bushel, what do you think they'd say, and what they've done to fix it?
Yeah. I think, biggest mistakes, I think they would say that, they've certainly learned from any of them. But one thing that, but before I go into like what they would probably say, I think one thing that I've really been impressed with Jake and Ryan about is they really try and help other entrepreneurs not make the same mistakes that they made. There's certainly like different company structures or, early on when they were starting out, they had, different people that were, part of the ownership structure, and that they didn't do anything. But then Jake and Ryan early on, they were, in their early 20s, and they're having to write these, at that time, significant checks to buy out people from the business because they just didn't know how to do these business structures. And so they're trying to carry that message along.
Yeah.
I
That's
think
very common, by the way, among some of the founders that I interview. They're very good. They really want to give back and help other founders.
Yep. Yeah. And then, I think, they would say, hiring, it always feels like, I think we all feel like we're not hiring quick enough, like not being able to make that decision quicker, particularly with some of the key strategic hires. I think one of the consistent things I've heard is like, we should have done this 6 months ago. But yet it always still feels early. So it's this weird paradox that we should have done it 6 months ago, but it still feels like we're early in doing it.
Also very common.
Yeah.
Knowing when to do that.
Yeah.
You don't want to hire too early. I just re-interviewed a founder last week because a company was acquired from the first interview, and he said they always feel like they're behind the curve because they don't want to hire too early and then have to lay someone off.
Yes. I mean, that's a real thing, right?
Yes,
because
it's a real thing.
It's particularly in, we're a 240 person company.
Right.
This isn't a number on a spreadsheet. Like, know the person that you would potentially have to, exit from the organization. And so that puts a different, feeling towards it. And so, rightfully so that some of those thoughts, might delay us a little bit from making those decisions.
So you mentioned earlier on that there's really nobody that was doing what Bushel's doing. Is there now? And why was that? I mean, what's the competitive landscape look like in your industry at this point?
Yeah, it still seems to me that in terms of this digital infrastructure within the grain industry, I'm not seeing, another company take that approach or position. I'm seeing some, Me Too type of products in the space that are almost more like point solution-ish, where Bushel is more looking at that holistic end-to-end type of solution. Some of that is certainly happening because, once you've paved the path as a company and you show others how it's done, you're certainly going to have some folks come in and, some competition is healthy, right? I think it helps focus us as a company. And I think it helps push us too. And so, there's some healthy competition that, certainly pushes us to, really start to think about and move forward what we think is most important for our customer base.
Yeah, since we're talking about employees and hiring, I'd like to talk a little bit about the leadership team of the company. And there are about 14, if you look at leadership from the VP and above. And if you look at the C-suite, there are 5 of you, of which 20% are female. That would be you. If you look at the 14 leadership, members of the leadership team altogether, 3 of those are women. That's pretty, as a woman, I would say fairly bleak numbers. If I were interviewing your co-founders, I would be beating them up about this a little bit more, but, tell me a little bit about that. And those faces are pretty much all white. I don't want somebody to beat me up over, critical race theory and, all that. But, I don't know if there's just no diversity in your business, in agriculture. I mean, I know that's not really true, I don't think. But, what the reasons are behind that, if the company's making effort to bring in more women in leadership.
Yeah, it definitely is a focus, and it's not just women in leadership. It's all diverse types within leadership.
Right.
We have a dedicated focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion at Bushel.
Okay. Great.
And so while we're not at where we, should be today, we are certainly staying focused on it. And,
Mm-hmm.
The probably sad part of the story is Bushel probably has one of the more diverse teams
in your
within
industry.
ag tech. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of leadership teams that, don't have even a female on them.
And that doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, is it to me, it doesn't seem like it's a pipeline issue. I see studies saying more women are graduating from agriculture programs than men at this point, more women graduating from, 4-year universities.
That's right. Yeah.
And so it certainly doesn't seem to be a pipeline issue, although it takes time for you to get into those leadership positions. So maybe there's a bit of a lag there. But where we've spent time recently with our company is, is it a retention issue within organizations? I've got just a whip smart team member. She's early on in her career, maybe 4 or 5 years in, and I keep saying, I want to work for her one day. And,
that's great.
she made a really good point. And she said, people go to where they're invited,
right,
but they stay where they're welcome.
That's really interesting.
And so how are we, of course, it's how are we making sure that we're inviting diverse populations to the table? And then what are we doing to keep them here?
Right.
And so and it's a worthy focus and, challenge for us. And I think, part of that, like I said, we were going to try and keep headquartered in Fargo and grow the team here. And it is a bit of a homogenistic makeup here in the Dakotas, in northern Minnesota. Yeah. And so as we've been able to hire across the United States, we've been able to increase our diversity, which has been incredible. Yeah, great.
That's really fantastic that you're doing that. And that's the beauty of being able to say, I mean, like you said, there's your silver lining, right? That, the reality is you're in North Dakota. Okay. Not a lot of diversity there, where you are, but the opportunity to be able to go outside of there and hire the best people and actually recruit, when you talk about, getting the diversity and then retaining that diversity. Those are 2 of the 4 things that companies need to do to become talent centric, right? You have to one, be aligned, and then you have to recruit the right people. You have to retain the right people. And part of that retention is succession planning and leadership development. Those are the subsets of that. So how do you keep someone like this? Well, you ask her, how long do you want to work here? What's it going to do what do we need to do to keep you here? You become a culture of feedback.
What do we need to do to make you feel included?
That's right. Again, companies don't ask those questions, and they need to start doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is one thing I'm, really proud of Bushel for leaning into that conversation internally. We did an offsite for our executive leadership team last week. And, one of the topics we talked about was diversity within the company. And, what are some of the action steps that we can take to, first have the dialogue. We ended up doing a town hall with our entire company to talk about some of the challenges around diversity in the organization with certain, demographics. And so it takes having that dialogue and first acknowledging it. So it's always an ongoing discussion. It's not going to take one thing to solve it. No, but it has to be on the radar and on the agenda.
Well, because that conversation will worry some of your people.
Yep.
That they're going to be out because they're the wrong sex or gender or color. Excuse me, sex and gender. They're the wrong gender and they're the wrong color. Right. And that can be very threatening. Right. So, how does a company do that to make up the diversity of what our country actually looks like as a country? Yeah. Right. So it's really great that you're taking steps to do that. Is there anything about your industry that bugs you? Or any things, plural?
Oh, I don't know if there's, necessarily anything that bugs me. I think there's definitely a segment that is skeptical of, and it's not just technology, but anything new. And I get that. I 100% get that. Because if we think about, agriculture in the US, particularly in the northern climates, which is where I grew up. And so I'm most familiar with that kind, that production cycle. As farmers, you get one shot a year.
Right.
That's
right.
it. You right. have your planting plans, you have your prescriptions that you're going to be putting on, you have your agronomic plans that are in conjunction with it. But that's it. And so if somebody is coming in and selling you something that is, going to magically improve your yield or magically decrease your costs or something.
The panacea, the promise of a panacea. Yeah.
It better work.
Yeah.
Because most farmers, they get 45, 50 shots at this ever.
Yeah.
So it better work. And so I can appreciate the skepticism. I get it. I think the other thing that bugs me a bit, it's funny. I said, well, there's nothing that really bugs me, but here are two things. Is there's been this viewpoint that farmers are adverse to adopting technology.
Right. Yeah.
And we at Bushel just fundamentally don't believe it. We believe that if they have been adverse, it's because they just don't understand the value. The value has not been presented in a way that
they haven't had the right value prop. That's exactly right. Yep.
That is helpful to them. B, they don't need it. Like it's only additive. It's not actually changing anything for them.
Right.
And so it's on, particularly as we talk ag tech within, the agriculture industry, it's on the ag tech companies to be able to provide and bring products to market that are, that add the value, right? Is it increasing revenue? Is it decreasing risk? Is it increasing operational efficiencies? Is it easy to use? I mean, fundamentally, is it easy to use?
Right.
Or is it this horribly designed thing from, that hasn't been updated since the early to mid 90s. So farmers are not adverse to technology. I just think they are going to use it if they find value in it and it's easy to use. And we have certainly found that hypothesis to be true with the products from Bushel that we've brought to the market.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think, most people are willing to use technology if it's user-friendly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how Apple was built, on being user-friendly. And I think that, I use technology all day long. I have numbers of different technologies I use. I also have complicated technologies that I hire people to deal with because I need to use them, but I want nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
So I pay somebody, go use your genius so I can keep using my genius somewhere else.
Yes. That brings up a good point. In one of the go-to-market strategies that we deployed with Bushel was in our customer success team, working with our, grain elevator customers and working hand in hand with them, not just handing them a training manual, but working hand in hand with them to help onboard to our products and then help them deploy and onboard their farmers to the products. So I think that, kind of, elevated level of account management and education was something that really helped us get, a really good head start in the market as well. We knew that okay, deploy the thing. Well, but you need the proper onboarding and education that goes with just deploying the thing.
Right. So where do you see Bushel investing in resources here over the next year?
Yeah. So we've got a couple of things that, we're looking out into, and one of them is really around the fintech, so the financial technology space, and continuing to take that, buyer and seller of grain journey, from, beginning to end, and be able to have that payment process or settlement process become more digitized. As I said earlier, that, a big majority of these settlements are happening in paper checks. So, continuing to invest.
Yeah. I rarely get a check from any of my clients anymore, ever.
Yeah. So continuing to invest in that, and then continuing to, really hone in our focus. What was interesting as, I talk about this early journey of Myriad, we were doing custom development across multiple industries. And then organically, we started, getting more and more projects in the agriculture space. And, and then we made the conscious decision, we're going to focus only on agriculture. And at that time we thought, okay, hopefully the well doesn't dry up, and, we're focusing too narrowly. And it was the opposite. That focus gave us the opportunity to go so much deeper and really become more well-versed within the agriculture industry to provide that value. And so as we think about that, what does that next level of focus look like at Bushel for us?
Right.
So that we can continue to go, we're going to go wide in some areas, but we're going to go deep in others. And so continuing to have those strategic discussions at a leadership level, it's going to be really fun, but a challenge as well.
So, Camille, if somebody listening is thinking, wow, this company sounds great, and guess what? I don't live in Fargo, so maybe they're interested in talking to me, what would you suggest they do?
So first, go to our website, bushelpowered.com. Lots of ways to get in contact with us there, and lots of ways to check us out and learn a little bit more about us too. So definitely check out there. We've done several, we're involved in a lot of different things within the industry as well. So you'll probably see us pop up here and there. And like I mentioned earlier too, we are expanding our team across the US. And that is certainly helping us, as we talked about earlier too, with bringing on diverse team members. So we're excited about that.
That's really great. Well, Camille Grotti, CMO, Chief Marketing Officer of Bushel, headquartered in Fargo, North Dakota. It has just been a delight to speak with you, and I thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Carol. This was a lot of fun to talk with you today, so appreciate the time.
Thank you for listening to Authentically Successful. If you are a successful founder or CEO who would like to be on this program, please visit verticalelevation.com/podcast/apply. If you learned something from this interview and it made a difference, please share it on LinkedIn or Twitter. You can also do a quick screenshot with your phone and text it to a friend. And if you know of someone who would be a great guest, tag them on LinkedIn or Twitter to let them know about the show and include the hashtag Authentically Successful. I love seeing your posts and great suggestions. Lastly, we are regularly putting out new episodes and content. And to make sure you don't miss any episodes, please subscribe. Your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show and mean a lot to me and my team. If you want to know more, go to our website, verticalelevation.com, or follow me on LinkedIn. This is Carol Schultz. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.